Hi, Stephen here for the Idiot Quilter, and here's another interview in my series of interviews with subscribers. Enjoy! Okay, so I have a very special guest today on the Idiot Quilter Presents, and it is Future Cat from New Zealand, which it's tomorrow there. So we're time shifting here. It's Friday when I'm doing this around 6 o'clock my time. And what time is it there in New Zealand?
It's 10 a.m. on Saturday, and it's about 1 degree here at the moment. So,
Oh, yes, because you're in winter, aren't you?
yes,
Yes.
very much winter.
Yep. We're just moving into summer now, and it's 19 Celsius here. So, yeah. And I have been to New Zealand. Beautiful, beautiful country. And I have been to Australia. I've been to Australia more times than New Zealand, but I hope to get back to both sometime soon. So, yep, I just love it. The people are so nice there. And best thing about New Zealand is there isn't any mandatory tipping when you go to a restaurant. I mean,
No,
we were shocked at that when we got there because that's just something that's second nature here in North America, especially amongst the Americans, but the Canadians too. But anyways, so we're going to get right into it. So where in New Zealand approximately are you located?
so I'm in Otautahi, which is Christchurch. It's in the South Island of New Zealand. We're about halfway down. Most people know Christchurch for two rather sad reasons. One, 10 years ago, we had some massive earthquakes that pretty much destroyed a lot of our city. And then in 2015, of course, we had the mosque shooting, which made international news as well. So we don't like that those are the reasons we're on the world stage, but
Yes.
that's
Yep.
yeah.
And I've been to Christchurch as well. And unfortunately, when I went, I saw, I think it was the devastation from the hurricane or the tornado that went through at that point. And they
That
were,
would have been the earthquakes. Yeah.
yeah, the earthquakes. It was
Yeah.
earthquakes. That's right. And
Yeah.
they were still in the process of cleaning up. That was back in about 2000. And I think that was 2018, I think,
Yeah.
2017. I can't remember exactly when I was there. Yes, it was. You
Yeah.
have to
And
see it to believe
cleanup's
it.
still going on. There's, yeah.
Yeah, it was devastating. No two ways about it. So before we move on a little further, I want to ask you a question about your cultural background. Do you have Aboriginal, if that's the correct word, or Indigenous background? Because I noticed on the emails that we've been sharing back and forth, you will often write in an Indigenous language.
Yeah, no, that's the Maori language. We call it Te Reo Maori, which means Maori language. I am not Maori myself. I'm what we call Pākehā, which is of European descent.
Oh, okay.
But it's considered polite because we have come into this country. And so therefore, that is the native language of this country. So it's polite to at least learn a few phrases, and it's quite common. Most people will greet you with kia ora and use a few words here and there, just part of the way we speak English is
Right.
with a bit of Te Reo in there.
Yeah, well, I think that's very interesting, and I think that's the right thing to do. And we have our own issues with our Indigenous population here in Canada, and we're trying to make corrections and be more respectful and that kind of thing too. But it's a long road. But that's not what we're going to be talking about. What we're going to be talking about is you are a maker. Now, are you a quilter, a sewist, or what kind of maker are you?
I'm a quilter primarily, yeah. A
Okay.
quilter who experiments with other things from time to time.
Well, that's great. We all do. We all do. With that, I know I certainly have. I certainly didn't come into quilting. I've only into it for the last 5 years. I was paper crafting and scrapbooking and art journaling before. So I know all about the making world. It's exciting. And that's what I want to show on here. So how long have you been quilting?
Yeah, not much longer than you, I would say. I started quilting in 2013. I'd had a messy breakup and I just wanted to reinvent myself. And so I thought, I'm going to go and learn some new hobbies. So there was a craft shop that offered hobby classes, and I went along to a whole load of different things. And one of them was quilting. And I thought, this is it. I found the hobby that I want to do from now
Yep.
on.
I think
It
that's
was-
what happened to me
yeah.
too, the same way. And I notice you have a creation on the wall behind you that looks very, very interesting. Can you tell
Yes,
me a little bit about that?
that is, my mother is a paper crafter, and she's recently got into Inktense pencils. I don't know if you've
Yes, I know what you're talking
they're
about.
wonderful. And I learned from someone in my quilt guild that you can use those on fabric. So at Easter, I was down visiting and I said, would you mind if I just had a little play with your pencils, and started experimenting on fabric, and ended up with the whole family all playing with the pencils and drawing shapes. And we realized that you could also stamp onto fabric. So get all their stamps out, and we did all stamping and colored them in. And we had a wonderful day just coloring in. And so I said, right, I'm going to turn all of those into a quilt. So that's what's in progress behind me.
I know. Oh, so that's still in progress. It's not finished yet.
No, that's the quilt top's done, but I've still got to quilt it.
Oh,
So,
yes. Yes. The ever looming over your head. I need to quilt it kind of a thing. Yep. I got it. Well, that's, yeah. I have Inktense pencils, and I've never ever tried to use them on fabric. I knew that you could. I just haven't. It's one of those things on my list. I haven't got to it yet. But looking at what you've done really is kind of inspiring me to get my Inktense pencils out and give it a go
it's a lot of
with this.
fun.
It
Yeah.
looks like a lot of fun. So I think you've already kind of answered this question a moment ago, but how did you get started? Now, you said that you changed in your life, had a major life change, and so you were looking for something, so this was it.
Yeah, I took some classes, and one of them was with a New Zealand quilter called Tartan Kiwi, who some people know. She does a lot of paper piecing designs and sells them, and has a book on animals, I think, and paper piecing. So I did this class with her, and we paper pieced a little heart, and it was just so much fun. So my introduction to quilting was actually paper piecing, which, like, for most people was like, oh, that's the ultimate in hard things, and that was where I started. So
yeah,
it's like,
so
I think of that as the easy way.
So it's downhill from here then, really.
Yeah.
Start at the top and work your way down. Yeah, that's right. Whatever works. So did you have anyone in your family that influenced you in this way? Did you have any quilters in your family, like in generations?
No, there's not a big quilting tradition in New Zealand. Most of our inspiration comes from North America. But
okay.
my grandmother sewed, but she was a garment sewer, and in the 70s and 80s, as you did, she would make clothes for all the family. And so I learned to sew from her. And I've actually, behind me is that's my grandmother's sewing machine.
Oh, okay.
Which is a lovely Benina record electronic, which was in 1980 something, was like the ultimate top of the range machine, and
I was
it's
going to
still
say,
going strong. I love it.
Yeah. So do you do any garment sewing then?
No.
Nope.
I tried that when I was in high school and realized it's not something I'm skilled at. And
yeah, I know how you feel about that. Yeah, I don't think I could bother. I have no interest to do garment sewing. My husband does, but and he makes like the shirt, he made this, but I have no desire to do that whatsoever either. So what is your favorite creation to date, and why?
My favorite would be a quilt I made for I work at the university, and we have a student rainbow group called Q Canterbury. And I made a quilt for them because they had a new room they were setting up as their sort of safe space on campus, and they asked me to make a decoration for it. So, and it's a circle of rainbow with a heart in the middle, and I just love it. It's all scrappy and it's colorful, and it's
right. Was it paper pieced?
No, actually, I used a Dresden template to make the circle, which was a lot harder in practice than I thought it would be.
I know what you mean. I've tried that myself. Yes, I know exactly what you mean. That's true. So is that still hanging where you originally put it?
Is. Yeah, it's hanging up on the wall, and I'm just so proud of it.
And rightly so, I would say.
Yeah, it's a beautiful quilt, and the cause that I made it for was important. So
Yeah, that's true. Now, just before we go on, just for clarification here, classify, I hate to say classify or label or anything out. You are non-binary, am I correct?
Yes.
Yep. So your pronouns are they, them, and their as well. And I'm sure most people that'll see this probably know what we mean by non-binary. So we don't need to get into that any further because that's beyond the scope of this. But just so people understand, where we're coming from. Well, where you're coming from, I'm coming from on the spectrum as well, but a different part of it. So moving on then, what type of quilter do you describe yourself as then? Do you say traditional or modern or eclectic or scrappy or?
Exploratory, maybe. I like trying new things. It's like I've done something once, I get bored with it. I want to try something new. So I'm always like trying out a new idea, but also very scrappy. Partly through necessity, because fabric's really expensive here because we have to import everything from overseas and that's expensive. But also just because I love using up every little scrap that I've got. And yeah.
And I think most of us are like that. We have a pile of scraps, and even when we do a scrappy quilt to use up our scraps, we seem to get more scraps. I've never figured out how that works. They breed in the night, I swear, with it all. Little elves are picking them up and bringing them to and drop them off at your house or something like that. But yeah, I think exploratory is I think a lot of quilters probably fall into that category because I think that's the fascination with quilting, isn't it? That we can try new things and, let our imaginations go and say, well, what if? And if you're not saying what if as a quilter, I think you're boring. I mean, I'll just say it. I think you're boring because there's so much out there. It's just not enough hours in the day to handle everything. Here comes a furry visitor. Hello. And what's your cat's name?
This is Parsnips, and
Parsnips.
She is a very determined cat. When she wants to do something like be on camera or not be on camera, she will do exactly what she wants.
Now, does she love laying on your fabric?
Oh, yes.
Of course.
Yes. Yep. She also loves lying on my ironing board, and we have had quite a battle to not jump on the ironing board, especially when the iron's on.
Yeah. Well, she's a beautiful cat.
Yeah.
I called her a she. Is it she, he,
yes,
or
it is. She's a she. She's a tortoiseshell, and tortoiseshells are always she.
Oh, okay. Are they?
Yes, it's a genetic mutation on the X chromosome. So
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Well, geez, here we go. We're learning about quilting and we're learning about cats too. That was something I did not know. Well, she's more than welcome to be on here. So, and I don't think we'll be able to discourage her anyway. Yeah, of course she does. Yeah. So then that takes me to, I see that you are in your sewing room. So can you describe it for me? Is it large? Is it small? How do you have it organized?
Very small, and it's organized just in how can I fit all these things in here. There is not a lot of room to move around here. I have a tendency to sort of shift furniture as I need depending on what I'm working on, but yeah, I'm not very good at estimating measurements, but it's, well, you can see. Yeah. This is a very wide angle camera, and it's picking up most of the room.
Right. So it's cozy is what you're saying in that. And it looks, though, the way you have it laid out, that everything, even though it's a small space, but it does look like everything is like within your reach. So, your ironing board is over there, your cutting mat is there, I can see. And I'm assuming this is your computer area, probably what you're facing now. Yeah. So it's the only sewing machine you have, the one that was your grandmother's?
I do actually have two older ones. I've got a very small Singer cub, which my mother got as a wedding present. So it's 2 years older than me, which it's
so
tiny.
She told you. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't use that very often anymore. And then I've got another one, I can't remember what it is, that was another one of Mum's that I got before I got Granny's one. I I needed something slightly bigger than the little cub to sew on. And Mum said, oh, I don't use mine very often. You can have that. And I used that for a while, but it doesn't have, you can't drop the feed dogs on it. So it wasn't very good.
Right.
And then when Mum realized I was getting quite seriously into quilting, she said, well, I've got your granny's machine. How about you take that one?
And you
Yes,
said, yes,
now
yes.
I've got the good machine.
Yeah. Well, I've never met a quilter yet who has only one sewing machine. That's just doesn't happen at all with that. So what's my next question here? I'm watching your cat because I love them so much, and I'm completely distracted by your cat, but that is okay. What's your favorite? Do you have a favorite tool or technique, or like, let's start with a tool, something that, you know, you reach for all the time, you couldn't live without, you just couldn't quilt without it.
Oh, does my sewing machine count?
Yes, it does.
Yes, that is my favorite tool. It's
and what about a technique? Now, you said you started with a paper piecing. Is that your favorite technique, or have you found something you like much more?
Yeah, I quite like paper piecing, but I don't do it that often. I think because you have to muck around with like printing stuff out, and
right.
Yeah, it always seems like so much more effort to get started than other forms of quilting.
Right.
Yeah, I've been experimenting a little bit with some curved piecing recently. So
with what was that? What kind?
Curved piecing. So
curved. Yes. Yeah, okay.
That's something I haven't mastered yet, but I think I could really enjoy it once I figure out how to do it. I was just actually earlier just watching your video and doing the Drunkard's Path blocks.
Yeah, I was going to say, not my favorite with that. That was a bit of a challenge. I had done curve piecing before, but this was, the Drunkard's Path was new to me. And yeah, I can't say I don't mind doing it. Just not something that if I could avoid it, I think I probably will. I'm always looking for other ways to do curves. And
yeah, I just want to try. If someone says to me, this is hard, that I immediately want to try it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's good to challenge ourselves though, too. I think that's one thing about the quilting, especially if you get into my age group, you know, you got to keep your mind going. Or, you know, and I think quilting really does it for me anyways. It challenges my mind. I have to think about things. I have to use math, so and things like that, which I'm not so good at. But
I'm a former maths teacher, so I'm actually like, maths doesn't worry me. Yeah.
You see, I'm a former English teacher, so you know, if it was all written in words, not a problem. But anyways, I think that's the beauty of something, of any craft, really, because it taps into that part of your brain that makes you imagine, it makes you creative. And I think that's really good stimulus to keep your mind going. You know, so many people get to a certain point in their age where all they do is sit down in front of a television set and basically rot. And I do not want to be one of those people, because I've seen too many examples of what that results in. No. So, if you had all the money in the world, is there a piece of equipment you would invest in?
Oh, I mean, the answer is always got to be a long arm, doesn't it? Except for the size of this room, I literally could not, even if I emptied the room, I couldn't fit a long arm here. So I'd have to first buy a new house to fit the long arm in.
Yeah, I know what that feels like in a sense. I didn't buy a new house, but yeah, I had to fit it into mine, and I did it. But yeah, it's a bit of a challenge. But yeah, I think most quilters, that is the ultimate go for them, is to get a long arm. Well, I shouldn't say all quilters. I know some quilters who do beautiful quilting on their domestic machine, and they have all the patience of Job, and I really admire them for their ability to be able to do that. I wasn't one of them. So I bought the computer for mine. I just set it and forget it, sort of.
I do a lot of free motion quilting on my little machine, and yeah, it just takes a bit of patience. And
yeah,
I love the process, but I'd also love the freedom of having a great big machine and not having to wrestle with the tight space. And
so what's your least favorite part of quilting then, of the quilting process? Is it piecing? Is it the quilting? Is it the layering, the binding?
Making decisions.
Oh, you mean like in color choices or pattern designs?
Yeah, I always have so many ideas and deciding which of them I need to do. It's like all the components, like I was going to say the hand sewing when you're putting the binding on, but even that I quite like the just sit in front of the TV quietly sewing away and you get it done.
See, I don't hand bind. I do it all by machine because I'm horrible with the needle and thread. There'd be blood on my quilt for sure with
Yeah,
that.
there occasionally is on mine. I'm not a good hand sewer, but I don't know. It kind of feels like when you've put all that work in, it deserves the respect of doing that last.
Yes, I suppose that's very true. But I'm very careful when I bind it though with the machine. So I put my spin on that as far as the care on it. But yeah, hand sewing and me, not a good combination.
I kind of think it's like, is it Angela Walters who says people are quilt worthy or not?
Yes, I think it is. Yeah.
And it's like, quilt worthy people get a hand sewn binding.
Okay.
It's just I'm just putting this together for fun, then it's machine bound. So
well, that will lead me to another question then. So what do you do with your quilts when they're done?
Well, so far most of them have gone to family members because I'm still new enough that I haven't got the volume, but I'm starting to get to that point where I need to find another outlet for quilts. So one of the quilt guilds I'm in has their charity this year is a rainbow youth group. So I've very much latched onto that, and it's like all my quilts are going to them this year. That's
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out what to do with all mine because unlike you, I hoard my quilts. And I don't know why, because when I'm done a quilt, it is done. It goes upstairs, folded up, sits on my guest bedroom bed. Right now, there are 33 of them sitting up there. And I have given a few away. And I'm getting more into the mode of, okay, let's give it up because, I never look at the quilt again. I love the journey. And when the quilt is done, I take a picture of it, fold it up, put it on a bed, and that's it. Like Jared sets, fold it up. So I'm looking for people that I know that are quilt worthy, as they say, out of it. So I've given a few away, but I need to give more away. And I need to give some quilts. I need to find what I consider a quilt worthy charity as well. And there's a few out here in my area. I just have to get off my rear end and explore them a little further and see if they would like one of my quilts. So you just mentioned about belonging to a guild, and I was going to ask you about that. Do you belong to more than one guild, and what's that experience like for you?
So Christchurch has two guilds. I still haven't figured out why we have two guilds because it's not a big city, but I suspect somewhere back in the day someone didn't like one guild and started their own, but
probably.
So about a year ago I was looking for a guild to join because I thought that's about where I'm at in my quilting progress, and discovered there were two and didn't know which to join, so I joined both thinking I'll choose which one I like better and stick with that one. And I kind of like both of them, so I haven't decided yet if I'm going to quit one.
Oh, so you're just a guild slut.
Yeah, pretty much.
And have you ever belonged to any online groups?
No. I've taken part in a few like one-off online like quilt-alongs and things.
Right.
But I'm not. Yeah, for someone who's a YouTuber, I'm not a big online person. I kind of don't like Facebook and I don't like being those kind of groups. So yeah.
I agree with you. I'm not a fan of Facebook either, but I have become, since COVID hit us, I have become a real Zoom fanatic. And so I have joined, I belong to a Facebook group that's men quilters, and we occasionally get together for like a sew day or sew afternoon or something like that. I run some myself as well, and I actually quite prefer taking classes and doing sort of the sew day thing online, on like in a Zoom format, not the Facebook live. I don't like Facebook lives, but the Zoom format I really do like, and it's especially great for retreats. I don't know if you've ever been to a retreat. Have you ever been to a retreat?
No, I haven't. one thing that sort of puts me off is I don't own a car. I'm trying to live car free.
Okay.
And that makes it really hard when you've got a sewing machine and cutting mat and all those things that you've got to carry
Yes.
with you.
Right.
It's very awkward. You can't really get in an Uber and bundle all
It'll,
that
yeah.
stuff in.
Or
Yeah.
strap it to your back, but
Yeah.
kind of thing might be a little awkward. That's true. Well, I find that retreats online, I really enjoy those because I don't have to lug all my stuff with me. And
Yes.
inadvertently, in the retreats I've been to, I always, no matter how careful I am about packing, I forget something every time. If I'm in the privacy of my own home doing this, I still get the same experience for me, and everything's there. So I don't have to worry about it. So yeah, you should give it a try sometime. You might be
Yeah,
surprised.
yeah.
I usually run a retreat twice a year, one in the spring, one in the fall. So when that comes up in the fall, I don't have a date for it yet. It'll be late September, early October. Feel free to join in us. I know with you and the time thing, that might be a
Tricky.
bit tricky. Yeah, but you never know.
Yeah.
Okay, so you were saying there's not a lot of places to get fabric in New Zealand. So I'm assuming that the fabric you get, a lot of it probably comes from online. So
Yes.
do you have any favorite online sources that you go to?
Yeah, there's a couple of North Island quilt shops. We don't have a lot of good ones down here in the South Island, but there's a lovely one in Wellington that I order from quite regularly. And also when I'm in Wellington, I make a point of like going to visit them so I can see their fabrics
Right.
and they're lovely. They're called the Busy Bee Quilter, I think they're called. Yeah.
And how do you feel about buying your fabric online as opposed to actually buying it in store? Because I know some people have a real aversion to buying fabric online because they want to feel it, right?
I'm never too worried about the feel of it because I mean I'll sew with anything.
Yeah. Not picky. Okay. With that. Well, I always figure
colors sometimes are not quite the same online, and that can be a problem. But
yeah, that's true. There is a color shift sometimes depending on, a lot of factors there. And as far as the feel is concerned, well, if you're buying brand name quilting cotton, the feel already because, if you're buying something that you're getting like 3 meters of it for 99 cents, I would question the quality of something like that. But for the most part, I don't think you can go wrong. The only thing that can screw you up is, like you said, the color. It could be a little bit off. Yeah. I buy a lot online, although I do have access to quilt stores in my area as well. Not a lot, but probably more than you do.
So I find one of the problems when you go to an actual quilt shop is that like you can get overwhelmed by just how much there is there. At least online, you're only seeing like, a dozen things at a time on your screen. And sometimes you walk into a quilt shop, it's just like, where do I even start looking?
Yeah, I know. I solved that problem simply to say, I'll take 2 meters of everything. Thank you.
Yeah.
No, not really, but I wish.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, and it would be nice to be able to do that, but just buy the whole store out and shop your own stash. Yeah, that puts a whole new level on that on fabric buying. So, do you have any favorite experts or sources for information that you turn to?
Well, Angela Walters, I mentioned before, is definitely, she's my, in terms of the actual quilting part, she's my inspiration greatly. I take a lot of her ideas and make them mine. Yes.
Yes, she's excellent.
Yeah. Otherwise, I mean, probably all the standard ones that everyone watches, Missouri Star and all those.
Right.
Although I find now I'm kind of getting bored with their stuff because it's like I've moved beyond that. It's like I don't need those simple, here's what you can do with a 10-inch square type of things. I want to experiment a lot more.
I'm glad you mentioned that because when I first got into quilting, Angela Walters, Missouri Star, Jordan Fabrics. I mean, I still watch all of those, but I don't have the enthusiasm I want, instead, simply for the reason that you're saying, it's kind of the same thing all the time. And I've moved beyond that too. So I'm starting to go out onto the YouTube and start looking for things that might be a little bit different. for it, to keep me still interested in that kind of thing. But yeah, but we're lucky we have YouTube and that kind of thing in this day and age, because back when your grandmother was probably doing garment sewing and all that kind of stuff, well, she just depended on a pattern. I'm sure maybe she did her own pattern, but there wasn't as much out there to look into, as we do now. It's almost information overload in some ways.
Yeah, you can, anything you want to learn how to do, you can find it somewhere on YouTube. And
exactly.
Yeah, I find a lot more now. I watch a lot of quilters on YouTube, but it's more for the personalities, and I just like listening to hearing them talking about quilting, and I'm not so worried about what they're actually trying to show me. Yeah.
Yep. I know exactly what you mean. That's what I do too. So this must be a progression for quilters. We all go to YouTube when we start out, but then as we get better at it and we know what we're doing, we now become a little bit more discriminatory, I guess, about what we're going to watch. So I'm sure you've heard the expression quilt police. So what does that bring to your mind? And when you hear that expression, how do you feel about quilt police? Well, let's hear your definition of quilt police first.
Oh yeah, the quilt police are the ones who there are rules, and this is the only way you can possibly do quilting. And yeah, and my reaction is a bit like when someone says something's too hard. It's like, no, I don't have to do it the way you do it. I'm going to do it my way.
Exactly. With it, don't want to be pigeonholed into something either. And you said before, when I asked you what how you would describe yourself as a quilter, and you said exploratory, and I think that would fit into what you said as well with that. Yeah, I hate those ones that look at your quilts and go, well, you didn't make your half square triangle quite right, or your point got cut off over there.
Yes.
And
or you can't sew it that way because you'll have a bias seam, and it's like, well,
yes,
if it's a bias seam, I just be a bit more careful with it.
yeah, I know exactly with that. So I mean, nobody likes the quilt police, but there are quilt police. So I don't, it's kind of an oxymoron there. I think, if they do or they don't exist. Not so sure. So do you have any challenges or goals for the future then, in terms of projects you might want to do?
Yeah. I mean, I've got a list of a million quilts that I'd like to make, and every time I see a quilt with a new technique, I think I want to try that. But I think a lot of my goals are more around just trying different things. Like I've got an idea for a video I'd like to make one day, trying different paper piecing techniques, because I've been taught about 4 different ways of doing paper piecing, and I'd like to sort of try them all out on the same block and just see, okay, which of these actually does work best for me, and
yes,
things like that, just experimenting some more.
Yeah. Right. And having said that about making videos and that, of course, you have a YouTube channel. It's called Future Cat. Yep. And I will put the link in the show notes for this interview below for it so people can check it out. But I've been checking it out for sure. And I find your channel is very interesting because it's a little bit eclectic. I mean, you show New Zealand, which I think is fascinating as well. I love seeing that. But you have your other projects as well. Like I know on one of your videos, you talked about using the Inktense pencils in your experimentation with that, and then quilts and things. So how long have you had this YouTube channel, and why did you start doing a YouTube channel?
So yeah, the earliest video on the channel is from about 2007 or something, and it was just because I had a friend had a little puppet and was playing with it, and I filmed a video to send to one of our friends, and the easiest way to send it was to stick it on YouTube. So that's kind of how I started, but it wasn't serious. And then before the pandemic, that same friend and I went to France for a trip, and I thought, what if we could do videos while we're doing this trip? And so created it, went back to this YouTube channel I'd created a long time ago and just started putting up videos that I'd filmed on my phone and badly edited, but it documented our trip, and we had so much fun doing that. And when I got back, I thought, I want to keep doing this. And my original idea was, I'll just, because I travel quite often, would be like, I'll make this a travel channel. And then the pandemic happened.
Yeah.
So that didn't really happen.
Put the kibosh on that, didn't it? Yeah.
So I sort of, I've always had this thing in life, whenever I try and do anything where I'm like very focused on a single topic, I get bored so fast. So I thought, I'm not even going to try. I'm just going to, whatever I feel like filming, that's what I'll film. So sometimes it's, well, ideally travel, but because of the pandemic, I've been doing what I call travel local, which is just showing off my own country and treating it as a tourist and just exploring the places that a tourist might visit and showing some of the more hidden areas. Yeah.
Well, and I think that's what makes it really interesting because, there's lots of travel videos out there about everybody's country, and it's just pretty much the standard stuff. But to get a look at it from someone who actually lives there, I think it makes it more interesting. At least it does for me. And I think the thing that's interesting about your channel too is the fact that you seem to approach it with a variety of content. And we were talking earlier about why we sort of move away from certain YouTube channels that we used to watch all the time, but it just got same old. And I think one of the attractive features about your YouTube channel is it is not the same old. It's something a little different. Now, people might criticize and say, well, yeah, but there's not a definite theme that follows through. Well, does it have to? I don't think it does. It's an evolving thing, So yeah, I think it. Now, how many subscribers do you have roughly?
I think at the moment it's about 460. So being eclectic is not good for your subscriber count because YouTube algorithm likes you to have a single topic that is reliable, and I definitely don't do that. But I'm not doing this to make $1 million. I'm doing this because it's an interesting hobby. I'm enjoying the process.
Exactly. That's my approach as well. But I'm going to tell you now that after this interview goes up, do expect to have more traffic on your site. Because this is one of my purposes for doing these interviews, is to find people who are not the big names, because you can find the big names and they've got tons of videos out there and people talk about them all the time. I want the everyday people who are just like me, who just quilt. It's our hobby. That's what we do. No one knows who we are. And put it out there so that other people can find out that there are people on YouTube who are not big names, but yet have still a lot to offer in one form or another. So yes, you are going to have more subscribers. It may not be 1 million because I'm not that big either, but it'll be some. I can guarantee you that. So, all right. Now, this is always somewhat controversial in the greater community, and that is people think of us as quilters or as sewists or whatever, as crafters, and they use craft as a dirty word because when you can hear it in their voice, when they say, oh, you craft, means, oh, you have a glue gun and construction paper putting together. And one of my goals in life is to educate people that this is more than a craft. This is an art. We are not crafters. We are artists. We have to pick colors. We have to pick form. We have to do the construction. We have to make critical and creative decisions. That is all that any artist does. And just because we may not be using paint, our palette is fabric, we're still artists. So having that, how would you describe yourself as an artist? Now, this overlaps kind of with the question I asked about how you describe yourself as a quilter, but can we elaborate on that a little bit more? Like, what would you say when I said call you an artist? What does that, how would you define yourself then as an artist? I don't know, it's a pretty hard question.
There's definitely, I would agree with you. Yes, the distinction between craft and art is a very arbitrary one, and it's also quite a gendered one, that traditionally art is what great men have done and craft is what women have done, and we'll just ignore that because it's domestic and it's uninteresting. And so sorry, I get into the gender politics is like
No,
interesting.
no, actually, I do want to pursue that a little bit because that is very interesting. It's not a new thought to me either, but I would like to hear from your point of view as a non-binary person. How have you ever had any problems with other quilters because of that?
Yeah, I mean, not overtly, but there's always this feeling, and it's one thing that sometimes makes me feel a little bit uncomfortable about being a quilter because it is so gendered. And
Mm.
you know, in my guild, it's so common for someone to come in and say, "Oh, hello, ladies," and I'm like in the back going, "Not a lady. Don't call me that." Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I
Yeah.
know how you feel because I joined a guild when I first got started. I don't belong to it anymore. And the reason I don't belong to it, one of the reasons is I was the only man amongst 100 women. And I was that, okay, ladies. And I'd go, ahem, I am not
Yeah.
a lady here. And yeah, it's that whole gender bias for that this is women's work. And it is not that. So that's also one of my goals too for these types of interviews, because I like to get men as well and people from various parts of the LGBTQ community on here as well to show that this is something for everybody. And let's stop doing the label thing on here, re-education in a way. So yeah, so as an artist, again, I would say that you probably bring to your art, because I'm looking at the quilt behind you, the quilt top behind you, and you are definitely bringing into your art symbolism of our community as well, which I think is definitely a plus and needs to be there because quilts do tell a story. And, I think it's important that that kind of thing is there. Have you ever had any backlash for doing that kind of thing in your quilts?
No, no, I've trying to think of any comments I've had or anything. The only thing I've actually had from someone was when I made a rainbow quilt, I had a comment on the video saying, well, how about doing some of the other pride flags? Why are you just doing rainbows? And it's like, well, okay, yeah, that's a fair comment, but
I didn't think that's where you were going to go with that comment, but
exactly.
yeah.
No, I've never had anything negative, but then it might be just because I mostly share my quilts with people who
are
worthy of them. So yes.
Yeah, or allies or whatever we want to call them these days. Hard to keep up with the terminology, but for it all. Yeah. So, well, that's good. So just to go back when you're saying about the guild, when they're going ladies in that, did you actually say, excuse me, that's not my pronouns?
I have a couple of times, but it's hard work. And it's like, I mean, you'll know this, coming out is not something you do once, you do it your entire life.
Our life, exactly.
And sometimes it's just, I don't want to have to explain for the millionth time that I'm not a lady and that I really, really don't like being addressed in feminine terms. And sometimes you just want to go, I'm just going to sit back and ignore it and pretend that didn't happen because I can't be bothered. And
yeah, I know what you mean about that too. And I mean, most of the time guilds have an older clientele, I guess, or whatever, participants in it, and it's hard to change something that they, you can't teach a new old dog new tricks kind of a deal. But it's one of the things. Doesn't mean we should stop. Doesn't mean we shouldn't stop. We have to make people aware, and I guess we can do that in sort of we don't have to be militant about it, but I still think we need to stand up for ourselves as well.
And I think our allies need to stand up for us too. And this is something I think a lot of people feel awkward about, being a vocal ally because they think they're going to tread on our toes or something. And it's like, I would love it if when someone in the guild says, hey ladies, if someone else would say, actually, remember, Jennifer's not a lady. Yeah.
Well, actually, in my guild, I got them to the point where some of them were saying, not ladies, quilters. Use the term quilters. So, it does work, but I still left the guild. But that's a story for another day about that. So if anybody wanted to get into or thinking about getting into quilting, that kind of thing, do you have any advice for them who just getting started in all of this?
I think don't be scared to just give it a go, because I see so many people online saying, oh, I can't do this because I don't have a pattern, or I don't know how to enlarge this because I don't understand the maths. And it's like, it's all very straightforward. The maths isn't hard. The maths is all in whole numbers or halves at the worst. You're not like you're dealing with tiny fractions. Anyone can add two halves together and get a whole. It's not hard maths.
Yeah.
And if you get it wrong, nobody knows what you're going to make in the first place. And this is what I remember my mother teaching me when I was learning to bake. And she said, if a cake turns out wrong, you tell people it was a pudding.
Yeah, exactly. That's true. Yeah,
Yeah.
and that goes back to the old idea of quilt police. No, you're not doing this for anybody but for yourself anyways. So, and you learn from mistakes, and oftentimes mistakes, as Bob Ross used to say, those are just happy little oopses, or
Exactly.
the kind of thing. And then you stick a tree on there, but whatever. Well, is there any parting words you would like to say? Anything else you'd like to tell us about or say before we leave?
Oh, yeah, no. Probably the main thing is just to, remind people that, quilters aren't all ladies, that there are a lot of people out there doing really amazing quilting stuff of all genders and all sexualities and all sorts of people. And just open your mind a little bit to.
It's a very large community.
Exactly.
And all are welcome in it. Yes. So that's true. Well, I want to thank you so much, Jen, for agreeing to this interview. And your YouTube channel is called Future Cat, and the link will be in the show notes below. I found this very fascinating. And yeah, so I hope you won't be a stranger. I'll be still watching your YouTube channel as well. And
And if you ever come back to New Zealand, you can come and visit.
Yes. Yes. And I hope to get back there someday too, as well. Quite seriously, I love that part of the world. So I want to thank you. Please stay on the line for a few minutes, but I'm going to end the recording. And again, thank you so much for agreeing to do this. It's been great.
Thank you.